here given by the German historian whose name was the Christoph Cellarius. Christoph Cellarius. Christoph Cellarius, who had been from 1638 to 1707 AD. Right, you can consider him. So he was the first historian to give us the tripartite history or division. So he divided history into, right, so history divided into 3 periods called ancient, medieval, and modern history. Right. So this is what we can always consider as a tripartite system of history, which particularly we are currently using. Fine. So we always consider it in the form of ancient or medieval or the modern history, whether that part belongs to which among these 3. Right. I hope you have finished. So okay, there was a tragedy question, right? When did Mahabharata had? So whatever the original events which are related by Mahabharata, probably in between 9th to 8th century, right, BC. So the text probably reached its final form by the early Gupta period, you can consider it. So in between 9th to 8th century BC. Okay, go to the next one. Now, you have now a ancient, medieval, and the modern history, right? So that is the case you can always consider in this particular case. Now, obviously, the next thing which will be coming about, already we have considered in 2 different ways, that is world history and by the world history and what you can consider the Indian history. So world's ancient history, world's medieval history, world's modern history, then world's India's ancient history or medieval Indian history and modern Indian history, right? So that would be the case. Now, again, in between, the most expected question, if Mahabharata period get answered, so when did Ramayana? So obviously, you know, Ramayana had been happened earlier than the Mahabharata. So it is whatever the epic, right? So the ancient Indian epic, which composed sometime maybe around 5th century BC, right? So 5th century BC, you can consider. Okay, so now in this particular case, what we can consider, yes. So once now you know the Indian and the world's tripartite division of the histories, fine. So you will be always having the different things. So on the basis of the tools Prehistoric period is further divided into three sub-periods called lithic period, copper period, and iron period, right? So that would be the case. Then medieval period is further being divided into the different things called early medieval period, Sultanate period, Mughal period. And the modern period, as far as India is concerned, I'm talking, right? The modern period is through the point of view, modern period will be from the, let's say, 1750, right? So when the monopoly of trade and direct appropriate revenues have been considered, right? So here you will be having three different divisions. One is ancient India, right? So ancient India, that is ancient history, right? So now I will be considering it as from the beginning, right, to around 647 AD. So slightly it has differed about it. Fine. So you can always consider this one. Now, in this one, what did you have, right? So you will be always having here a prehistoric, right? The prehistoric period. So here you can see the extension of the ancient history, right? Extension of the ancient history as far as India's point of view, right? So whatever we have considered, that is worldwide accepted. So prehistoric period, fine. So this prehistoric period we have considered from 30 lakh BC to 600 BC. Now you are just trying to put down everything in ancient India, what you are going to consider. Then obviously next part you can consider in ancient India is Indus civilization. Indus civilization. So you will be considering its time period from 2500 BC to 600 BC. Sorry, exactly its time period is 1750 BC. Right. So 2500 BC to 1750 BC. And later on, it had a Vedic culture. Vedic culture. So which was from 1500 BC to around 600 BC. Fine. Then there was a period called Mahajanpadas. Mahajanpadas, right, or Mahajanpad period. So which was from 600 BC. This is an introduction, and see, in this way you have to understand, or we have to study the ancient Indian history or medieval Indian history or even modern Indian history. Fine. So all these things you have to consider. As far as your NDA exam is concerned, you will be always having these different parts. Fine. So Mahajanpadas period, that is from 600 BC to 322 BC. 322 BC. Fine. Then there was a Maurya period. There was a Maurya period. Right. So if you consider this the Maurya period, so most of you must have seen the serial Chandragupta Maurya, right, or something like Chanakya. And so 320 BC to 185 BC. As of now, don't worry about these years, right? You should just remember these things, particularly from the Indus civilization. So in prehistoric, you will be considering only three things, right? So I'll be considering the prehistoric as lithic, copper, and iron. Right? So here, lithic period, copper period, and iron period. So this is a very small period you can consider in. But from Indus civilization, so you will be having questions on Indus civilization as far as if you consider the previous year's question papers, right? So you will be definitely getting questions on Indus civilization. Probably sometimes you will be having a one or two questions on Vedic culture. You will be having questions on Mahajanpadas, Maurya period, right? And after Maurya period, there was a Gupta period, which was very important. But in between these two, that is Maurya period and Gupta period, the post-Maurya or pre-Gupta period was there. So post-Maurya, right, or pre-Gupta period. So which was from 185 BC to 319 AD. Right, 185 BC to 319 AD. Then Gupta period started. Right. So see, as an introduction, what are the speciality of this Gupta period? So Gupta period was a period which was considered as the classical time period or the golden period of India, right, of ancient history or ancient India. So Gupta period, which is from 319 AD to 550 AD, right? And then last thing you can consider as far as ancient Indian history is concerned, that is the post-Gupta period, right? Or there you can have Vardhan dynasties, right? Fine. So which was from 550 AD to 647 AD. See, we have started at 30 lakh and we have to go to the 647. So the beginning to the 647 AD, right, which we are considering as ancient India. Now here the question comes in, right, that every one of you is always afraid of the history, right? Even if you consider the current attendance, right? So probably most of have got feared with this one, or they might not be having the interest. But whether you do have interest or not, right, irrespective of that, as far as the exam preparations are concerned, you have to always consider this one. So by and large, you do have 18 to 20 questions, 18 to 20 questions. And not only for the point of view of the questions, but this will definitely teaching you, right, what you should do and most importantly, what you should not do, right? So we usually tell that, or we usually ask ourselves that what we should learn from the history, right? So that is the important thing. So before going to ancient history, in between I will tell you, right, so that you should not fear the history. See here, you have variety of points, right? So there are variety of points you will be having, right? Now these variety of points, though there are a variety of points, right, you should not worry about these things, because history is not as boring as it sounds if you prepare it in the right way, right? So history is not as boring as it sounds if you prepare it if you prepare it in the right way. So here question comes in, what is the right way? Right. So what is the right way? Right. The most important thing, or the most important question you can consider. Right. So no doubt you will be always starting from Indian history. Right. Now here, most important thing you will be always considering, right, in a right approach or in a right way, is prepare in the chronological order. Prepare in the chronological order. Now, what is chronological order we have considered, right? So here we have considered, right, so the time period. So in this time period, what was the distinct, what was notable, right? What was the impactful had been happened. So these are the different things, or these were the different points which had been happened, right, by making a kind of impact, right? So, as I said, this was called as the golden age. This was called, considered as golden age, right? Then in this case, you will be finding out the first use of navy. You will be finding out the first use of navy. In Mahajan Padas, you will be finding out one of the Mahajan Padas have used elephant as the uh, as one of the war supporting technique, right? So they have used elephants into their army, right? Then one of the Mahajan Padas had started the standing army, right? Standing regular army, right? So these are some of the things which you will be always considering that are called chronological order. So in Mahajan Padas, there were 16 Mahajan Padas, right? Then in the Maurya period, not only Chandragupta was there, right? Followed by Chandragupta, there were some other rulers, Mauryan rulers, right? Then later on again in the post-Maurya, that is in the pre-Gupta period. So in between this, right, or during this, there were some of the foreign invaders. Foreign invaders had been come to India, and they have ruled the India, right? So again, who were there in this Maurya period, right, or prior to Maurya period, right? In the Mahajan Padas, you must have heard a name called Magad. So Magad had the ruling by, or Magad had ruled by the ruler called Dhananand, who was the last ruler of the Nanda dynasty. And during his ruling, right, when he was ruling at that time, the great Alexander had come to India, right, who wanted to become Sikandar, right, that is world conqueror, or the world conquest, right, Jag Jinknara. So these are some of the things which we will be telling you, right? See, these were some of the things which are also asking, which are also making you learn some of the things, right? Jagat Vikyat Alexander, why he failed, right? What had been gone wrong? At least these are the things which will be asking you to think on this, right? And that is the case. Very first, you can consider the right way is, or the way which you will be always calling it as timeline graph. Probably when you will be going into the modern India, you will be always having a timeline graph, right, of major events, of major events. Here we have considered major rulers or through the point of view of societal impact that we have considered, right? So here you will be always considering the diagrammatic representations in the better retention of the information, or the use of some acronyms, right? Use of some acronyms, right? You yourself can develop some of the acronyms, right? For example, if you consider here, right, in 1956, 1526, 1556, and 1761. So these are the three things which you can consider. So what had been happened? So these are the three Panipat's battles. Right? पानिपतच्या तीन लढाई 1526, 1556 and 1661, 1761. Right? So these were the three different things you will be always considering. So how you can consider it? So you can make a short story in between this, right? So what that particular short story you can consider? There was a boy at the age of 26. He started doing empire, right? He lost it in between. He got everything back when he was of the age of 56, and again everything has gone, right, away or vanished when he was in the at the age of 61, where he died. And as it is, this is the story of Mughal Sultanate, right? So Mughals entered in 1556. They had everything, right? So everywhere only Mughals, and by the end of 1761, right, nothing was there. So these are some of the things, right, or some of the acronyms, right? Khana kha ke pani pi ke, right, a kind of girl, chali ghagra pehan kar, right? So these are some of the things you will be always is the read, right? So you have to always read. This is the way you will be always considering as far as the preparations of history is concerned, right? So those who want it, see, having a big dream, right? लक्ष्य बड़ा होने से कुछ नहीं होता, right? I always feel that, fine. So though it is true, right, someone might be thinking that what I am saying, right? So लक्ष्य से बड़ा होने से कुछ नहीं होता, right? If you have that particular kind of determination, right? लेकिन जिद से हर लक्ष्य बड़ा हो सकता है, fine. So मला हे बनायचं म्हणून काही नाही होत, but if you have a kind of determination, like the passion of it, so जिद से हर लक्ष्य बड़ा हो सकता है. That would be the case. You can always consider in this case. Fine. Anyway, then you can consider the after ancient India, right? See, if you could learn these things, that means even in this session only, or in this lecture only, you can consider or you can learn the whole history, right? Ultimately, what you have to do, you have to only go through all these things, take some of the takeaways, right, and also learn some of the learnings, right? That's it. What is it? And by remembering some of the facts, right? So that is what we are. That is what you are learning, the history, right? So this would be the case you will be always considering. And then here you will be having the medieval period, right? So medieval Indian history. So after ancient Indian history or ancient India, here you will be having medieval India, right? So you will be having medieval India. So second is this one. Now what you will be considering in medieval India? right? So here you will be having three different things. First is the early medieval period, early medieval period. So where we have reached to 647. So 647 AD to 17 sorry 1206. So here I can write 647 AD to 1757 AD. Right. So this is the time period of medieval India. Right. So early medieval period is 647 to 1206. Then the Sultanate period. There is the Sultanate period. Fine. So what is Sultanate period? So which was from 1206 to 1526. So now I will not be writing AD because it is not necessary. And the last part, which is called Mughal period. Mughal period. Right. So which had started from 1526, right, to 1707. Right. So this is what you can consider in. And then later on, you get started, right? The third thing, I think it is around 1757, I can write, right? So the next one is here, the modern period or modern period India. So modern Indian history you can consider. So which was having a time period from 1757. So you can consider till date, right? So here you will be having again three different things: stages of British colonialism, then British policy towards the native states of India, and obviously the last one is the national movement, right? So in modern India, you will be always considering the stages of British colonialism, right? Then second you can consider in this British policy towards native states of India, native states. And the last thing you will be considering is national movement. Right. So see, you will be having questions on Sultanate period, particularly Delhi Sultanate, Mughal period, definitely. You will be having questions on stages of British colonialism, questions on British policy towards the native states, right? Wherein you can consider the Cripps movement, then cabinet mission, right? You will be having different kinds of, in this case, you will be having different kinds of viceroys, and obviously here Mahatma Gandhi's teachings, right, and all other things which you will be always consider. So this is what we can consider as far as the Indian history is concerned, right from the ancient history to the modern history. Right. Now, here again, if you consider the thing which is very essential, right, that is called the sources, particularly called historical sources. So not only for Indian history, but also for any kind of history, right? You have to always consider the historical sources. So what kind of historical sources you can have? So very best historical sources is always, very first one you can consider is literary sources. So literature. Is there any literature, right, which had written down? Fine. So that you can consider, which is called literary sources, or yes, sculptures. Sculptures. Fine. Literary sources. Then later on, now these literary sources will be further divided into indigenous sources, right? So, or you can consider them indigenous and foreign, right? So here you can have the indigenous, fine. So indigenous, and second is foreign, right? Indigenous and foreign, fine. For example, see indigenous and foreign. So not only for modern, right? For example, I will be giving you of this particular. So in Chandragupta's period, right? So Chandragupta had defeated Seleucus Nicator, and his what we can consider minister, right? Rather, one of his minister, he was an rather ambassador, Greek ambassador, right? Who had been in the court of Chandragupta, Megasthesis, right? So Megasthesis had written the Indica, a book named Indica, right? So in Indica, he had written something about Chandragupta, and as far as indigenous source, so it has become foreign source. Indigenous source of Chandragupta is Arthashastra, written by Kautilya, right? So you can consider these two things, right? So you will be always coming across these things, right? Now, as far as these indigenous sources are concerned, they are further divided into two things, right? So indigenous, see, this is the introductory thing, but once you understand these, I think definitely your interest get enhanced, and your understanding in history will be eased, right? So indigenous is further divided into two things. One is called religious, and second is secular, right? Religious and secular. Now, under the religious text, you will be finding out some Hindu text, right? So here, Hindu text, right? Then some Buddhist text. Now see what we are seeing, Buddhist text, right? Then you will be finding out Jain text, right? Jain text, fine. And under the historical, or sorry, under the secular text, or under the secular indigenous things, you will be finding out the historical text, राईट. जर कोणी कोणाचं काही लिहून ठेवलं असेल तर सेमी हिस्टॉरिकल टेक्स्ट, सेमी हिस्टॉरिकल टेक्स्ट, राईट. नाउ सी रायगड जाळला गेला म्हणजे काय, रायगडावर सगळे पुरावे असणार ना, सगळ्या गोष्टी होत्या, सगळे ऑफिशियल, सगळे खलिते होते, सगळ्या गोष्टी होत्या. पुरावे जाळले गेले म्हणजे सगळं त्याच्यात संपलं, किंवा सगळा जो डेटा आहे किंवा सगळे जे पुरावे ते संपले. पण काही जहागीरदार किंवा वतनदार किंवा काही सरदार यांना जे खलिते, त्यांना जे लेटर्स पाठवलेले होते, त्याच्या साह्यानं जो नंतरच्या काळामध्ये इतिहास पुढे आला. तुम्ही असं गृहीत धरा, जर रायगड जाळला नसता किंवा रायगडावरचे सगळे पुरावे जर सही सलामत असते, तर अजून आपल्याला किती वेगवेगळे आस्पेक्ट समोर आले असते, राईट. So you can have the things which you can consider in this. So here you can consider नंतरच्या काळामध्ये काही राजांनी स्वतःच्या बायोग्राफीज, ऑटोबायोग्राफी, मोस्टली बायोग्राफीज लिहून ठेवल्या. सो बायोग्राफिकल टेक्स्ट, so which you can consider secular, right? So these are the different things you will be always considering in this. So Hindu text, Rigved, Yajurved, Samved, Atharved, right? So these were the Hindu religious sources or Hindu texts, which are called the religious sources, right? You will be always considering. Then, so Vedas were throwing a light on religious, social, and economic life, as well as the political life, right, of Aryans. So, from the history point of view, though we can have the more importance to the Rig Veda and Atharva Veda than the Yajur Veda and Sam Veda, right? So, these are some of the things which you can always consider in this particular case. Now, if you consider then the time of Upanishads, right, or some of other things which were falling in the Hindus, then Ramayana and Mahabharata, right? So you can again consider in this particular case, right? So these are some of the texts. Then in the Buddhist text, and I think we are at the end of the session. So anyway, this is what you will be always seeing, fine, or at the end of learning the whole history, right? What you will be getting